once you get to a certain point, yeah, you can become preoccupied with the things you've done before. You know, it's like, oh, this thing landed me in this new place in my life. How do I recreate that other thing? You know, and how do you make something that is the same but different? You know, like with me and the Fat Whites, it's kind of like there's been so many different members, so many different people writing, so many different. It's like what actually is it? You know, and at what point is it, you know, too much the same and not different enough? And it's like, it's kind of insane when you actually think about it, to spend years in these windowless little rooms, like doing the right drugs, the wrong drugs, the right drugs, having these fucking bickering matches that go on for days, weeks, months, years, you know, like the fallouts. It's inherently kind of like psychotic, you know?
101. I just got a magazine subscription to Thrasher magazine.
Thrasher.
For the first time ever in my life, because I'm an adult
metal
now.
And
Well, it's skateboarding.
Skateboarding. You know what? Skateboarding is one of those, like, for me, I've never been able to comprehend that.
What people going out
that.
And like, because you don't land a kickflip on the 100th time. It's like the 500th time.
It's just so. It's two things at the same time. One, it's incredibly unremarkable. You know, it's like you flip like a foot, half a foot. It's such an unremarkable sort of like display of whatever that is.
No, it's not. What if people do those massive gaps?
No, but that's you know, who gets to that point. And once you get to that point, I think, you know, your mother carried you in her womb for 9 months, you know, had to turn you from a fucking, you know, a grizzly like infant that doesn't know how to conduct himself or herself in the world. And then you're going to grow up and you're going to jeopardize that beautiful body, the organism that she gifted you with, doing like a flip down some stairs on a little bit of wood.
You're going to break your arm.
You know, you're going to break. I mean, it gets worse than that, you know.
Yeah,
and it's just, I look at it, I'm just like, I understand when people want to engage in, like, you know, Mortal Kombat in a boxing ring or a.
Do you think it's more like there's more performance there? There's more entertainment for other people. What's the philosophy?
I think there's a conduit for aggression and violence that's healthily ritualized, because it's lurking in everyone.
Same with skateboarding, though, right?
No, I don't think
it's a ritual for that person.
I don't think that deals with anybody's violence, or, you know, I think it lends itself to that indulgent kind of mopey kind of like adolescent. And you look at the people that engage in it, and they're permanent adolescents, you know, aesthetically as much as anything else, you know. So I've always had trouble with skateboarding, but anyway, you've got a subscription to Thrasher.
It makes you think. One of my favourite things about the book that you and Adele Stripe wrote together. You wrote it together. How did that work?
It worked surprisingly smoothly. Actually, I don't think we had like one proper argument the whole time. There were a few moments of kind of awkwardness, you know, because you're essentially like editing each other's, you know.
Yeah, and that's not like straightforward. You're deeply connected personally to this thing you've written, right? To have someone else go over it and say, no, change that. Is that difficult?
Well, with that, when I agreed to do it, I was about to go on tour in Asia and Australia and all this kind of stuff. So I was thinking I'd just chuck her the odd paragraph, you know? Like, I wasn't like in the business of writing the biography of Fat Whites at that time. But she came to me with this project and I was like, oh, this is great. I'll learn a bit about writing, you know? And then obviously the pandemic struck, so it just became like, you know, primary focus. So I ended up kind of doing a lot more work on it than I ever suspected I would. But I find I work really well when I have somebody like a teacher or a mentor or just somebody to kind of like, you know, give me a little star when I get it right and give me a little thumbs down when I get it wrong. I'm kind of a bit of a geek, I think.
Well, I think it's that kind of validation can help with the fuel. And it sounds a bit rude to say validation, because it's like, I think everyone needs a little bit of validation.
Everyone needs a little, but some people, they don't respond to that. Like, some people have like just like, you know, anything that even has a whiff of authority about it is just anathema to them. But people providing you with a kind of hoop to jump through, and that was what it was like with Adele. Right. It was kind of like, try this, try that, try this. You know, and I'd have like, you know, why don't you write me something about Glastonbury, you know, and can you get it to me by, you know, like 2 Tuesdays from now, you know, and that's enough for me, you know. If I'm left completely to my own devices, it can just like I can just chase my own tail around. I need a kind of cut-off point.
And Fat Whites is like you're a story band. I feel like the first thing that people will say, "Oh, have you heard this band?
Yeah,
they did that mad cunt thing."
Yeah,
and did it ever feel like, because I've done it, when you have like those kinds of like mad cunt times in my life, sometimes sometimes I don't want to think about it too much.
Yeah.
Did you feel weird thinking about, getting naked and throwing poo around and doing drugs and smashing, like cutting yourself and bleeding everywhere, that kind of stuff? Did you find it sometimes, like, how did you find going back to it?
I mean, I didn't have any issue with that at all. I found it was kind of like I never tried going to therapy or anything like that. Or I did. I tried a few times, and instantly I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense for me. You're just in a boxed-in room.
You didn't see any reason to air it.
Not in that capacity, but writing everything down and making what is essentially a fiction out of it. I mean, I don't think you can write accurate memoir. It's kind of impossible. It's always just a story that you build out of these memories, and how reliable are memories, So it's always kind of this nebulous thing anyway. But I found it was really a way of just sort of like moving beyond all that, whilst capitalizing on it.
Is there two sort of sides to that then? Like, you and your friends had a lot of fun and like, had a bit of naughty fun, but that's obviously not the whole picture.
No.
And you don't want to make it that the whole picture.
No, I think
you don't want to let that be the whole picture.
No, but I think it's kind of like, I don't know, if you establish that level of kind of cretinousness to begin with, then the only way is up from there, because you've successfully lowered everybody's expectations, So tactically, it kind of makes sense. I think people would be surprised that there is another record that has even happened. They'd be so surprised they won't think whether or not it's any good, But a story band, I think we're a bit like Herzog's films are kind of not nearly as good as the story of how they get. It's like Fitzcarraldo. It's just a bit dull. But the book about it,
I hadn't seen any of that stuff.
And the Conquest of the Useless. It's such an amazing book.
Okay.
And the doc, when they're all out there, The Burden of Dreams or whatever. It's amazing. But the film itself is a bit meh, And I feel like that's maybe how people feel like about Fat White, sadly.
It's difficult. I think there's always going to be like, tell me if you've like thought much about this, but like everything you put out in the world ever, whether you're a writer or a band, people are going to see, or they're going to define it or contextualize it in a way that's totally out of your control. Whether it's a photo that has a particular style or a music video. People, and I'm not talking just journalists, they're like a conduit to the way that people feel about stuff, music, but like that's so out of your control.
Context management is only possible to a certain point, but I guess part of the game is to try and like fuck around with that a little bit.
Right.
People's perceptions, like I'm saying, like establish yourselves as these kind of ghoul men, and then like you're sort of at least you think you're one step ahead, like then sort of on your terms, even though they're the shittiest terms imaginable.
Is it a conversation? I think like about 10 years ago, I would have thought this was such like a labouring thing to talk about music. Now at the wise age of 32, I'm like, music is a conversation between the artist and the listener. And that's that's an idea that I quite enjoy ruminating. I enjoy thinking about that shit. Have you thought about it much?
I mean, I think it's inevitably that's in the mix there. I think how can you avoid that? I mean, you're not at that point except maybe when you begin and you're just kind of like hacking away in a cave somewhere in the shadows and nobody cares. You just have yourself and this relationship you have with these towering figures, and they're basically godlike. They're basically divinities, you know.
Yeah, your
The
band
people
members.
that have led you into this horrible like delusion that you too can like play a part, you know what I mean? Whether it's fucking Morrissey or Marquis Smith or whoever, you know, choose your
You're
whoever
the
it is.
inspiration
Your
person,
inspiration,
yeah.
and these people are kind of like they beam these thunderbolts down from on high, you know, and then you're just privately, you know, nourishing this horrible, you know, fallacy, you know, that you too can one day give it a crack, you know. And at that point, yeah, you're more purely in a dialogue with these abstractions as opposed to, you know, people are actually going to hear this, because you've got your kind of like, I don't know, you've got that side of yourself which, you know, is vanity and confidence, and then you've got the other side which is pitiful, merciless realism, and nobody's ever going to hear you, you know. And that's kind of how you motivate yourself, like to do anything. And that gets compromised the minute that you have any kind of an attention or public kind of. It's why you'll get all these great debut albums that never get followed up, you know, because that mechanism of like crushing insecurity mixed in with wild arrogance is tainted by the adulation and the crowds, and suddenly the arrogant side is much stronger than the essential kind of like picking on yourself, you know. And I think most artists have that same thing. They'll oscillate between wild self-belief and wild self-doubt, you know, but that is kind of like how you make a thing. You know, when you've got the belief, that's when you push it forward, and when you've got the doubt, that's when you edit the fucker, you know. And it's like moving along. But I think once you get to a certain point, yeah, you can become preoccupied with the things you've done before. You know, it's like, oh, this thing landed me in this new place in my life. How do I recreate that other thing? You know, and how do you make something that is the same but different? You know, like with me and the Fat Whites, it's kind of like there's been so many different members, so many different people writing, so many different. It's like what actually is it? You know, and at what point is it, you know, too much the same and not different enough? And it's like, it's kind of insane when you actually think about it, to spend years in these windowless little rooms, like doing the right drugs, the wrong drugs, the right drugs, having these fucking bickering matches that go on for days, weeks, months, years, you know, like the fallouts. It's inherently kind of like psychotic, you know? But there is some, again, like some nebulous thing that constitutes like what it is.
Do you have a touching point of that? I mean, for like a movie that you saw when you were a teenager, or a book or a record that you think, you know, you watch it, you listen to it now and you're like, okay, that's the nucleus of it. That's the nucleus of Fat Whites. Do you have something like that?
Oh, what, like a few kind of like cultural linchpins?
Yeah,
where
that
it's
underpin
kind
your
of...
songwriting and your lyric writing and your image making.
I think you're always kind of collecting things, you know. I think with this record, I got really into E.M. Cioran, and I was just more into like literature in the last few years, you know. But back in the day, there were obvious ones like, sorry, I think that's... I think like The Fall was a big touchstone, you know. That was kind of like you know, there's a way to be in a band, you know.
The prolific nature of it, the kind of...
Well, the prolific thing, we haven't managed to tap that, but the kind of like rotating cast and just generally kind of acerbic thing, mixture of kind of like high and low cultural kind of modes. And a general attitude, but it's like the sound of the Gun Club or whatever early on, you know.
The fucked upness of the Gun Club.
Yeah, just that kind of percussive kind of thing. That was a big thing early on. And then we got more kind of into electronic kind of stuff. But recent times, it's been more books. Like I kind of go between like writing essays and front Indicius the last couple of years, you know. So I'm either in a kind of like club at 2 a.m, like doing this weird acid kind of, or I'm like, you know, at home with like endless cups of tea trying to figure out like why I got so, you know.
Yeah.
So,
is that work to be writing stuff is that getting published, or is it more for you and the release? Is it stuff that you want to get published?
I guess I'm working on another collection of essays that I hope to build into another book, you know.
You've written it online as well, haven't you? You sort of got into the blogging kind of...
I was writing a few articles for Unheard, like as a kind of like a bit of part-time work.
Yeah, there we go.
And I did that social thing during the pandemic. So I've been doing a lot of writing when I get a chance, you know, like that's kind of my next big kind of project really, is to put a whole book together of stuff just about the last 5 years, this weird kind of the thing where you're between youth and middle age. You're not really neither here nor there, you know, that kind of transitional kind of phase, you know.
What are the biggest things underpinning the last 5 years for you? Are you doing more of some stuff, less of others? I know everyone is always, but like, what are the big ones for you?
The pandemic for me was like it revealed myself to be more of a kind of social caner as opposed to like an out and out degenerate.
You like being around people.
Yeah, it was more like, there's nobody to get, you know, so I stopped getting fucked up really for like long stretches for the first time in my adult life, I guess. That combined with writing the book, and writing was the thing that I really took to, you know. And it's a thing that I can't do if I'm hungover. It's like I'm walled out of that garden if I'm like even a bit like...
You can't put your ducks in a row. You can't.
No, I've not exercised that muscle enough like some of the writers I've gotten to know since going down that. And these other people are like fucking machines, you know, and they can do it after they've had 3 or 4 glasses of wine the night before, you know, because they've been doing it for 20 odd years or whatever it is. But I hadn't written an essay or anything like that since I was, you know, high school, really.
Right. And you studied in London. One of my favourite parts of the book is when you thought, and this struck with me as someone who became an 18-year-old around 2008-9, when music was in a weird place. The bands you would be reading about I didn't feel very connected with, and the bands that I was into were a lot from the States, and punk rock and hardcore bands, and they felt too far away. And you said the most honest thing you felt like you could do as an artist is do a bunch of ketamine and be lying on the floor somewhere in a bar. And I thought, that's not my jam. I've never done those drugs, but I understand what you're getting at, because like, what is honest about like what was going on in music around then? Yeah. And there was nothing much that I felt honest for me. And I thought, that's a really interesting, you'd identified that at that point. You'd identified that was the most honest thing you could do.
I think it's just sheer despondency, you know, combined with like a terrible chip on the shoulder and a real passion for getting out of your tree, you know, boredom.
Right.
It's just that thing. And boredom, that's the key, that's the kind of key ingredient, you know?
That's why we did drugs as teenagers, and why people continue to do drugs is
But
because
they do less now, though. That's the thing. And it's steadily diminishing. And I think drugs have been kind of supplanted by social media, and like it's a new, you know, people, like boredom itself is under threat. You know, the same boredom that created, you know, the cultures of the 60s, the 70s, you know, it's been a steadily diminishing level of boredom. And I think now we're reaching a kind of like, you know, a fatal kind of collapse of boredom. And every moment of every day you can have like a shiny piece of distraction.
Yeah, you pick up your phone, you scroll down, you're like, okay, how's everything? There's at least 5 things you could be looking at any one point.
Yeah, you don't get these kind of like gangs of like misfit, kind of bitter, socially dysfunctional, neurodivergent kind of freaks. Neurospicy kind of gangs of like musical gimps clubbing together so they can throw mud at the what they think is the establishment. Instead, you have, you know, those same people, you know, atomized behind their screens, privately, you know, anonymously, you know, throwing together like memes, you know, and like flogging the interweb with these like nasty little memes. And that's, you know, instead of getting dressed up like Nazis and singing songs about Joseph Goebbels, they're just like, you know, they're making these, it's sad what's happened to our culture, you know, the kind of like that knacker spirit is, it's diminished, you know, and I think that's the key thing that's missing is just like allowing people to be absolutely bored, you know.
There's that skateboarder who invented this.
Love that stuff.
This new phone where it's basically you can't do anything on it.
Okay.
It's like a new phone that you can't get onto any apps. Okay. And they kind of, you know, these people forecasting the future, saying, you know, we think this is going to come in. I think people are going to realize exactly what you said. You're not the first to say that, you know, and it's good that you're not the first. You know, people are realizing that boredom is a unique kernel of why the most interesting shit in the world happens.
Yeah.
Because you have to, you're like, you get that idea, you get slightly deluded about this project, and then you actually make it happen.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a pretty common tale of the most exciting music, projects, shit that make you excited.
Yeah, it's why, you know, it's difficult not to look at this period and the coming period as like just an endless kind of sea of mediocrity, you know? I mean, if you think about it, even the 60s were too noisy, you know? And I think if you go back and like the literary achievements of previous eras and, you know, or a bunch of Greek guys sitting around inventing democracy and shit, you know? It's fucking, they didn't have any, you know, there was nowhere to go and just get a burger or... cups of tea. It was fucking nothing, you know. So they had to really just entertain themselves, those guys, you know.
I think there's something in that, and in the jobs thing, because most people work jobs they don't want to work.
Yeah,
and so
somehow all jobs end up being like that. Doesn't matter what it is you do.
Yeah,
it really doesn't. You will start just regretting it. Like
you feel like you could be somewhere else.
Always, and that's another condition of the death of boredom, I think. It's an extenuation of that, just like there's always somewhere else, there's always someone else, there's always just else, you know? There's always fucking options, just like death by like choice and convenience, you know? But anyway.
No, I'm with you. I got a job at TalkSport, and I lied to get the job.
Now. Let's get the
gloves off.
The layers off.
The layers off. And I got a text from my mate being like, yeah, we just bought a dinghy and we're going down the river in... the one that's by Clapton, and I'm like, oh my god, why the fuck am I at work right now when I could be on a boat having some cans with my friends? That will always be, I'll always have a bit of that FOMO action going along. Did you have that? I mean, another one of my favorite parts of the book, for, you know, just because it was so fucking real. I mean that book, you know, everything about what you've done is pretty fucking real. The showering in a bucket in New Cross before going to work at the Meridian.
Oh, the Maritime Museum.
The Maritime Museum in Greenwich.
Yeah, the Maritime Museum.
I'm like, Christ alive, you know, you're like a 21-year-old, like showering in a bucket.
Yeah.
Up the hill, and one of those hills that's really hard to walk up as well.
Pepys Road.
Pepys Road. It's a steep one.
Yeah, that was a shithole, that. You know?
The house.
It was a nice house until we lived in it, like all of the other houses, you know.
How many of you?
I think it was me, Mikey Drummer, and Nathan Saoudi. I think we were the three main tenants, you know. And I think we still owe Mikey's dad like money for like the bill they got like after that, because it was his dad that was the guarantor, you know.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if perchance he listens to this, I'm still sorry, and I'm still working on it, you know. But it was really horrible. Yeah, the toilet had a hole. There was a hole in the wall where you take a shit just there, because my brother had kicked it through one day because he wanted to use the bog or whatever, you know. So
it's not the way you get someone off it.
Yeah, there was this, you know, just this little window into his bedroom, you know. But the Maritime Museum, man, that was fucking boredom.
Because you were just standing on your feet all day.
Standing, and like that was the hell-raising period, you know what I mean? Pre-fats, it was even more kind of like, I don't know, when you're in your early 20s, it's just whatever you can get your fucking dirty hands on, isn't it? You know, I
think were you never too bad with hangovers?
No, it's now I am. Now I'm like, the hangovers are like my friend, because they've saved me from like destroying myself, you know. Like, so I love a hangover, you know. I have so much to thank them for.
Again.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't want to feel like vaguely suicidal for like 3 days like this week. Not really, you know. But back then, I just remember it being kind of, that was the point of life. You'd have a tenner or whatever, or 20 quid, and you'd be like, right, what's going on tonight? There's this thing in East, or there's this thing in New Cross. And then you'd go out and you'd try and just get yourself as fucking raggo as you could, you know? It's
something funny about that. The less money you have, the more likely you are to spend it.
Yeah.
If you've got a fiver, I'd rather go out and spend like a pint and then ask other people to buy for me all night than to stay in and think, I've got a fiver. You know what I mean? I'd rather go out and spend it.
You'd go out and chance it because you're young, and you know, when you're really young, you're really good looking as well. Even if you don't think about it at the time, it doesn't seem, because everybody else is also really good looking, you know. But you're young, you're full of vitality, you know, and life just sort of, you know, offers itself up to you, and you don't care, you know, and you're kind of indestructible. But having to go through those motions, stay up all night, and then go in and put on. They made you wear these little clip-on ties at the Maritime Museum, you know, and it was hot. They had a big glass roof, and you'd be stationed at a different room every day, and nobody gave a fuck about anything in there except for Nelson's jacket. So it didn't matter which bit of the museum you were in, unless you were in Nelson's jacket. You know, people would just all day. That was the only dialogue you'd have. Excuse me, do you know where I can find Nelson's jacket? You know, and that was basically your role. And you would have a seat, but you weren't allowed to sit in it. Okay. And if you sat down and you'd really want to sit down because you're fucking hungover, you know, like you can't be bothered with this shit. There's nobody here. This is the most futile thing imaginable. And you'd sit down. You think, you know, fuck it, I'll take my chances. And then 5 minutes later, invariably, some bloke would come out, you know, a senior with a clip-on tie as well, and tell you to get off your arse, you know. I mean, it was all kinds of like regulations there. I remember when they finally did give me the sack, which was not long into it, a month or whatever. They came and it was like, again, this sort of silver-haired guy came up and he handed me an envelope. He didn't say anything. And I was like, what's this? And he was like, you need to read this. I was like, okay, you know. And then I opened the envelope. I was like, okay, it says like disciplinary hearing at 2:00, you know. And he's like, is that understood? I'm like, yeah, you know, you could have just said, you know. And then I had to go to this other meeting and they were like, listen, your conduct, the lateness, you know, the not wearing the clip-on tie, the sitting, all this stuff, we're gonna have to let you go, you know. But of course you'll get your severance pay, you know. It's like, fucking severance pay, come on, you know. And they were like, yeah, you get, you know, because it's like a government thing or whatever the fuck it is. They had to give me like 6 weeks. I hadn't even been working there 6 weeks, you know. I was like dancing out of that place. Excellent. You know. Yeah. It's like amazing, quids in like for fucking nothing.
Have you dealt, I mean, getting and having those kinds of short-lived jobs, do you ever feel that weight on your shoulders? I often felt, even jobs that I hated and I knew that I didn't want to last long, when I left, I'd still feel like a pretty big wave of like, oh fuck, what's next? You know,
what, when you get quit, next. When you quit or got sacked?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. I guess you do. Yeah, I mean,
but you had music. I mean, shortly after that, you had something to focus on. The kind of reason why you would get fired is for the bigger picture of something else.
We had a mission, and we had a very definite sense of a mission. Me and my little brother, you know, at that time. Which, looking back, is real foolhardy because we could barely play like 2 chords, you know. It was just so dodgy, like. But there was a spirit about it, you know. There was just some sort of a like, fuck it, like about the whole thing. And it was kind of like that was your fun. You'd go out and you'd earn 50 quid or whatever playing a pub or something. Yeah. But would I get away after losing a job? I mean, no, I don't think I really did. I think I had I'd begun to become aware of some kind of like, I think it was, things got rough and then I moved to China for 6 months and I worked as an English teacher.
All right.
In my 20s.
How'd you find that?
That was a big lesson. I think before that I had serious issues with confidence and stuff like that. You know, I thought
Interesting.
I was like a broken machine because, you know, I'd gone to art school and come out of there and just started fucking up my life with aplomb, you know. And I couldn't get a job for ages after 2008. It was really difficult to get a job.
I say interesting because you hold yourself confidently. As long as I've known of you, which is obviously fat
I think a big part of that was being given like a bit of a role that was befitting of what I consider to be my own intelligence, you know, where it wasn't just pouring drinks or cleaning the floor or wearing a clip-on tie, telling people where Nelson's jacket is, you know, that you're aware that this somehow is beneath you, you know, and that life really should be offering you more than this. But you went to art school and you want to play in a band, you want to do loads of drugs, so suck it up, you know. But you get all muddled in your head, you know, your ego, the chip on your shoulder. It's like the injustice of this, you know. It's like, well, you know, we did tell you it was going to be tough. But anyway, I couldn't factor that in. I just got more and more kind of bleaked out by the way my life was going. Yeah, and then I was like, my big brother had moved to China like 10 years before this, or 5 years, you know, and he was like, come out here, there's just jobs like for everyone, you know, they pay you £20 an hour to be a teacher. I was like, I don't have to do any training. And he was like, no, I'll get you a job. I was like, this is too good to be true, you know? So I did. I booked, I had a really bad fight with Saul, I think, where we first came to proper blows. And I was like, right, fuck all this. And I moved over there. And 6 months I was out there teaching, you know? And teaching's kind of like a proper job.
And is it similar to sort of being the leader of a band where not only are people listening to you, but your kind of creative tone leads the whole ship?
Yeah, it wasn't a million miles away. There was some, on the Venn diagram, there was a bit of mutual space there. But just generally like knowing that you could handle a bit of actual responsibility, you know, like coming up with classes or whatever and like conducting like just like younger people, older people, you know what I mean? You're a teacher. It's a kind of pretend teacher in the Orient and you're kind of like, but a teacher nonetheless, you know?
This is why young kids, parents might give a young kid a responsibility of walking the dog or doing something that's fairly important, and that gives you good stuff. I'm the youngest of three. I never got any of that, and explains a lot. I got no responsibility, and I kind of had to fuck it up to learn how good responsibility is. Really, you know, a bit of responsibility is it's rewarding.
I think so. I think me and my brothers all missed out on that a little bit growing up. I think there was a kind of I think tyrannical is a strong word for my father, but I'm going to use it. and then I think it's strong, but fuck it. You know, we had a bit of an argument yesterday. Tyrannical father, and a kind of not a smothering mother because that's harsh, but certainly like compensating for this kind of edginess that's over here. You know, so between those two poles, my dad was always working, and then there was divorce. You know. And I think
how did you take the divorce?
Oh, it was great. No, I mean it was horrible. It was a horrible time, you know.
I found it weird.
It was fucking shit, and it was really ugly. And like my dad's Algerian, you know. It's just your
You a teenager?
Wife.
How old were you?
I was just at the cusp of adolescence. I was like 11, 12.
Oh, damn, yeah. So you know what's going on.
You know. I remember the first time I heard the word divorce. You know, like round the dinner table or whatever, and it was like a little splinter, you know. But
splinter's a good word to say it. I was the one that kind of encouraged my mum. I was like, yeah, like let's leave dad.
Yeah.
And then it happened, and I didn't deal with it until 10, 15 years later. And I'm like, that's now.
Right.
You know, I'm dealing with it now. It's funny how they get. And now I'm hanging out with my dad. But it's like, okay, yeah, that was weird. I was pretty foolhardy then. I was like, yeah, whatever. This is fine. I'm like, oh no, it is good to talk about things and think. It's good to think about things like that thing. But anyway, that's kind of not about me, but
no, I mean it's a fucker, you know, but it's completely the norm, you know. It's kind of like I find it weird when I meet someone whose parents are. I say, well, oh, your parents are not divorced. That's a bit strange, you know. What's that like?
Yeah,
you know, you must be horribly well-rounded, and they usually are.
Too much.
Who wants anything to do with people like that? You know,
I think it forces you to kind of. I think for me, I don't think I would have got into music so much if I had a rounded family, because the place was. I wouldn't have thought it at the time, but it was to escape for sure. Playing in bands and going to gigs.
I would have gotten a job that actually pays. I would probably have a mortgage by now. You know, it would probably be all right. Actually,
how's that come over the time of the band from the first record? And like playing festivals where I imagine you get like okay fees, and it's like, all right, like financially, you know, we could come home with a couple of quid. How's that evolved over the years for you? Like as someone who's naturally wanted, you know, we're human, we want to become comfortable. The more comfortable, the older we get. You
do. You really notice that as you get a little bit older. I kind of lived it pretty rough until fairly recently, though. Just from place to place, room to room, share houses and that kind of thing, you know. It's only in the last 3 years that I've been living with my partner and in a little flat that I rent off of a friend, and it's quite comfortable, and I think now I'm kind of, that's me fucked now, you know. I'm stuck. You know, stuck.
You can't go back.
It's hard. You know what I mean? I get
hard to go back.
And I get to a point where I'm like, oh God, you know, I want to be out in the, you know, and I'll go and I'll be in some other part of the world. And I'll go, oh, fuck, I miss like, you know, just like having a little cuddle and watching like telly. You know,
this is it.
Once you submit to that kind of like coziness, that raw coziness, then your battleship is all sunk. You know.
Well, I think we all need stability. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe there are some like mad cunts who just thrive off not having stability. But I think it's pretty normal to need some stability, whether that's a cup of tea and a cuddle and a good TV box set and the new True Detective because you got the Now TV membership.
I think
or
it is
something else. Maybe it's going to the pub every day. Maybe that's the stability.
And what it is, I mean, this is the thing with drugs and booze, and it is its own, kind of weird, thwarted version of stability. It's all about like control and agency, like people that I know that are proper addicts or whatever. That's kind of what it is. It's like, by my will, like I'm going to break the day up into these little bits of time where I have to get this thing, this meet that person, and life has an order. There's a security there. You just have to keep filling her up. And I think that's basically, it's just a way of doing things. It's just a way of styling it out,
Control's a big one. I think we need control. And we need to know what we're doing.
Yeah, but then there's that thing, you're always just kind of repressing a load of shit, And that is basically the price of like society and like a world of order. We all have to sort of chip in with repression. When people are like, oh, I think it's unhealthy, he's repressing this, he's repressing that. It's like, well, when people say that, I'm like, well, what else are you going to do with it? There are so many like horrible animal tendencies in each of us. It's like, well,
we don't have any friends left. Everyone would think,
nobody would speak to each other.
Do you air if you've got a gripe or if you've got need to vent, are you an airing person to your partner or to your friends?
Yes and no. I mean, I have a tendency to strop and to mope. I do. I have a tendency to strop and mope. My girlfriend's been good at kind of helping me come out of that a little bit, I think, because there's not really anywhere to hide, which is kind of oppressive, but there it is,
No, I'm with you. I think I've been with my girlfriend for 6 years and it's like...
I can see through your skin.
It's horrible. Yeah. I mean, I like it because I think I liked not having... in my 20s, I had a lot of things that I wouldn't tell anyone, and there weren't big secrets, but little secrets. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Like, I realised that it was doing me damage after a bit. It was eating away at me.
Yeah, that's important to be able to have someone to kind of just go to town on your shit with, But I mean,
and someone who supports you. I think I've said a lot. Oh, we need this, we need that, but we all fucking do need someone to support us. It's the validation. You are not a cunt for thinking what you're thinking right now. Is what I think a lot of people need.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, problem is when it gets a bit like a one-way street, I find my partner is like...
that becomes the routine.
Yeah, she's like super empathetic and, tolerant, and she'll let me bang on about my great dramatic fallouts with my little brother, whoever the fuck it is, and all the rest of it. And I'll go and go and go, and then she'll start, and I go, oh, must we? Must we?
And you don't want to be in 10 years doing the same thing.
No, you can't be like, it's not on. It's not acceptable. It's raw. It's a raw deal, It's a raw deal, and you know it, But sometimes, and it's just that effort, I guess. It's just like learning to make a bit of an effort.
Yeah,
is the thing I guess you learn from a proper relationship.
That's big. Like actually caring about something, and like rather than turning away from something.
Responsibility to another person. And I never really gave that much kudos, so much of a crap, again, before the pandemic. And I think it was when it was a pandemic, I was like, right, if this is the way the world is now, then I got to do something else, this is not going to work,
So you're enjoying the DJing? Enjoying being out late and doing that. What's the name of it?
Decius.
It's funny.
Eldusius. That could be a spin-off, like a kind of Latin sort of version.
Here we go. This is it. You could have the statue version of it.
Yeah,
you could paint yourself silver.
Yeah, Eldusius. Eldusius is going good. I mean, it's been the least amount of effort for a project I've ever worked on. So
what are you doing? What would be like a project? Would it be getting stuff on a stick, on a USB stick?
Oh no, when I go out with them, I'm like, they're all like DJs and house veterans. They're all a bunch of middle-aged guys that were there like first time round. There's one of the guys from Paranoid London and the guys from Trashmouth Records.
Right.
And they cook up a lot of beats. I go down to the studio in not New Malden anymore, Putney now, Liam's gaff, and do a load of ultra camp kind of vocals about whatever it is, make up a load of shit.
On the spot?
A lot of it on the spot, yeah. I'll bring a little notepad or whatever, but a lot of kind of ad-libby kind of stuff, sex noises and things, and grunts and groans.
Sounds fun.
It's fun, and then a month or two later, you'll get like a track, and they'll have like fucked with it and made it sound really cool and kind of like menacing and weird. And then we take it out and we do it live, and it's like these three guys kind of like stood behind what I call techno lecterns, just these black Kraftwerk type boxes.
Okay.
And their thing is to basically stand as static and emotionless as possible, you know, as kind of like.
But are people dressed up?
No, they're just in black.
Okay.
Behind
these box heads?
No, not box heads. They're just dressed in black, simple, muted, kind of like just there behind these lecterns, you know. And what they're doing behind there, I don't even really fucking know. And then I'm there in a kind of like homoerotic kind of meltdown, psychosexual kind of. I have a mental breakdown and writhe around on the floor, and they just stand there kind of static, you know. I don't know what they're doing behind there. They could be doing fucking Etch-a-Sketch.
Who are coming to the shows? Etch-a-Sketch.
Who's coming to the shows? I mean, it's not really the Fat White's crew, because it's not really that kind of. It's a different kind of music, you know. It's house and techno kind of bods. You know, we went and did the Berghain a few months ago.
Damn.
And that was.
How was it?
It was the sauciest thing imaginable. You know, it was just absolute sauce.
Did you go in? I mean, how do you go in? If you're an artist playing there, do you still go in through the front door?
That's it. I was intrigued about all that. Yeah, what's the process? You know,
tell all.
I mean, you do a sound check much like anywhere else, you know. But it's nice to walk around there when it's empty and spy it out. It's just a building, you know. Okay. It's just another building.
Yeah,
you know. And then on the night, you know, you go in through the guest list queue, and they didn't have anywhere for you to take I mean, I guess they're used to DJs and stuff, but they don't have anywhere for people to play there to hang out. There's no green room or backstage, which I found like, I'm like, okay, cool enough, but like before I go on and do a gig, I usually need to take a shit like twice, you know? Like that's just facts, you know? And okay, it's Berghain. You could probably get away with just taking a shit here next to the techno lecterns. But I wasn't really going to go for that tonight. I wanted to go for like Vaseline, 2 fingers up my hole, you know, like I wasn't going to excrete. So I had to say to the sound guy, and the sound guy was just exactly how you'd imagine a sound guy at Berghain, you know. The stage was there, and he wasn't above the stage. He was kind of embedded in it. And it was like reminiscent of like Das Boot, you know, the way just these men embedded in machine. And he was there on the floor, just this blonde Aryan head. You know, I had to go down and be like, look, man, like, I know you've got your code of conduct here, but like, I need to go to the toilet, and I'm not doing that queue. You know, I can't do it. Like, the queue for the bogs at Berghain's fucking bananas, because they're all queuing to do their drugs in there. You know, take you 20 minutes, half an hour to take a shit, like, you know, a PC shit in there. You know. So he lets me out through like a side door. And I'm there, I'm in the, you know, I'm behind the scenes, you know, and it's just like the most regular officey, you know, it's a little bit disappointing, you know, it's like behind that kind of like dystopian hard tech veneer, there's just like white, clean, you know, you could be like in the fucking Waitrose HR department or something, you know, but, you know, I had a shit backstage at Berghain, you know, like.
And the show was good?
The show was great, yeah. I mean, that was like a real dream for me, because I kept getting I went there once 10 years ago, and it was like a mind-bending kind of like, it's like dance music is, you know, fuck rock and roll. And then I tried to get in there 10 years later, which was 2 summers ago, and they just kept rejecting me over and over again. But I knew they were playing Decius in there, because the DJs give you these like feedback things. Okay. So I was like, my Decius alter ego is in there, but I am out here.
There's a website you can go on and see if you answer the questions right on the bouncer. You know, the really famous bouncer, I forget his name, but there is no code. There's no right way. There's no right way. It's pure.
I mean, it's sadism, is what it is. It's sadism, but it's playful sadism, I guess. Or until you're the one that's like flown over there and you're all excited about going, and then you've been rejected completely arbitrarily for like the 5th time. It's not playful then, you know.
So you played and people were enjoying it, and did you stick around afterwards? Was there
I did. I got completely raggo in there, you know. It was lovely, you know. It was absolute fucking bliss, you know. I felt like that was kind of one of the things. That's because it's perfect for that project. That's one thing that I always kind of wanted to do, you know. What do you call it, the bucket list or whatever? I thought as a performer, that's a benchmark for me, you know.
Does it change stuff with Fat Whites? Because, I mean, I love all those, so many brilliant venues up and down the country. But I still think there are tons of places that aren't being used that could be, loads of interesting buildings in every town. There's always like some kind of like working men's old club or, some interesting kind of building that could be made into an event. Is that something that goes into your mind after being in that kind of scenario?
Or what, like opening a club?
Well, not opening a club, but like playing somewhere that's not the usual place you would play.
Nah. I mean, it's just like that's a whole other thing. You know, what those guys have created is like a living, breathing kind of like work of art. You know, it's
not something you just do.
That's something. That's a whole
and
other fucking level. That's guys who know what they've been doing for 20, 30 years and refine this thing. I think it's got a long, very Berlin specific history. And it just kind of like a lot of the things you can get up to in that town render here. Pointless, really. I don't really go out much here. You know, I tend to go out to Berlin for a month or whatever in the summer and get it out of my system because it's just boring, you know? Like I was at Manchester the other week after DCS had played and David Holmes was playing down the road and he was on until 4 a.m. or whatever. And I went down to this other club with my, and he's put us on the guest list or whatever. And it's like 3:10 and they're like, sorry, mate. We can't let anybody else in after 1. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it just gets licensing laws. I said, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what does that provide for? What does that prevent? What's the point in that provision? Like, of like, I'm on the guest list. So it's like David sent one of his kind of like somebody from within, to come down, like the booker or whoever the fuck it was, and even they couldn't get it. You know, when bouncers hold their thing like that, they put their thumbs just under their armpits and push their little chest thing out, sorry mate, and it's just like, fuck this, like this is arbitrary in a whole other kind of a way.
On a basic level, if you don't get, if no matter who you are, if you don't get let out into the club, you're going to find something on the street. And that's not going to be better for anyone.
It's just people should have an outlet.
Yeah.
People should have an outlet. Well, what's the fucking point in a club if you can't go there in the middle of the night, Like, what is the, So we all went back to my brother's and did a lot of MDMA. It was horrible, because you're just in a living room and he's got this fucking, like, Alexa thing. My brother, I love him, but he's a bit of a pillock. Like, he loves the gadgets, If the new gadget comes out, he has to have it, So he's got fucking Alexa, but we've just brought these other people, they're pinging. So it's like, no, put Taylor Swift on or whatever it is, So there's never a song playing Taylor Swift. And it's just like you're sitting there and you're too fucking MD'd up to actually, like, deal with the situation. So like unplug the Alexa, get your phone in, because you're in that thing where, like, I don't know, you've been a cokehead for years, so when you do MDMA you do it like coke, so you do too much, so you're like, you got that kind of ride, that kind of like Stephen Hawking kind of like posture, kind of like, your body's in that, it's all different, you know what I mean? And you're beyond functionality, but you are really, displeased with the song selection, which is the only thing that can really redeem you at that point. Whereas you should be in a fucking big club, like listening to beats, so you're just sort of in this soup sound,
There's something amazing having something like that wash over you, like being in that environment where it feels like it's exciting, it's adventure. It feels like an adventure. It's
the best. I mean, I think if I want to go out now, I mean, I can think very few times I want to go out and see a band or anything like that, But if I do want to go like out, I'll go to something that's more like electronic,
Yeah.
Bit of ketamine, get into a kind of like trance-like state, But I am a bit of a bore these days. I don't go out that much.
What's exciting you, other than that kind of music stuff? What's exciting you at the moment? What's pushing you forward?
At the moment, what's pushing me forward is the same thing that's always pushed me forward, fear, scorn.
There's that great line on the new record where you're like, that equal amount of fear and ambition is the fuel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he said it. He fucking said it.
Yeah, that's about it, That's about it. You just kind of rolling with it at this point, hoping for the best, expecting the worst or whatever it is.
It's a great record.
Yeah,
It made me feel weird at about 9:30 this morning. I'm like, fucking hell, it's too early to feel like this.
Yeah, it's an odd one. It's an odd one, you know. I mean, it's kind of like there isn't really a genre.
Yeah, there isn't. There's a few moments where you're like, I know what this. I get what this, and then other moment, and then you're just like, no, it proves you wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it was no fun making it, so I hope people have fun. You know.
Hey, thanks so much for being up for doing this. Cheers for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
I like to end with asking what the biggest fuck up at work that you've made, or the biggest mistake. And the ones, I mean, to give you a little time to think about it. I mean, I was teaching these kids in Greenwich, and I lost them on the tube one day.
Fucking
hell. I lost 3 of them. I mean, we found them back, but we'd missed the classes.
How old were the children?
Like 15. So
oh, that's okay.
That was fine.
That's okay. I thought if it were like little 7-year-olds and that.
No, 7-year-olds. But
you know, it's quite a thing to confess to.
Tried to make some money like jizzing in a pot for, you know, the sperm donor, sperm bank. And my mum talked me out of it after I'd already done it, because my mum was like, well, she was like, you know, when you're 18,
they can come and get you.
Yeah.
They can come and get you.
And I missed the pot as well. It's a touch screen.
I mean, was it at least kind of a little bit of a kinky thing to do in a different place? Did you like it?
I did quite like it. I texted my friends before and after.
Yeah,
you know, I quite enjoyed that.
They would never let me do that because I was never off drugs long enough.
Do they have to? Do they test
I think
you?
you've got to be off drugs, no?
That's funny.
I thought that because I'm sure I must have looked into that, and I've never done it. I think you've got to be. You can't be like. You have to be.
You got to be pissing something that's like.
Normal
kind of.
You have to be at least a few months away from your last session on the racket or whatever it is, you know. But maybe I might stand a chance now, actually. But you know,
what's the maddest thing you've done? What's the sort of most memorable
work fuck up? I think the worst was probably, off the top of my head, would have been in China and early days teaching there. And I stayed up, you know, all night sniffing drugs with my bro or whatever, and his friends. And I had to go and start a new job at a new school that morning. And you get your shifts at the start of each day, and sometimes you'll have 3 classes, sometimes you'll have 6. You know, and I went down there, I did like my last line, I was listening to Alternative Ulster, I was like fucking, yeah, I was all high, and I marched down to take my first class. I had 6 classes, and it was like English corner first, which is where you have like 30 students as opposed to just like 6 or 2. So it's a tough class, you know, and I've got just like 30 Chinese all sitting there staring at me, you know, and the first part of the lesson, I'm still kind of zinging from the gear, you know. And then, you know, you get that horrible, like, plummet where the coke kind of fades out, you know? And then you're just there in front of all these, like, these young Chinese people, you know? And I was just like, I just ditched the lesson plan and turned it into a kind of personal therapy session, you know? I was like, look, like, I'm really not happy, you know? Like, I've had some, like, real problems, you know? And I don't know what it is or what's wrong with me. But, like, I find life really heavy, you know? I find it really heavy. And I'd be like, why, Mr. Saoudi? Why are you finding you know, they're kind of like broken English, you know? And I was just like, that was it for the rest of the... And I was like, this is class 1, you know? This is class 1. And I have to get through fucking 6 of these. And in between each 2, I have to pretend to be vaguely fucking normal while I'm, like, sneaking a beer, like, in the break, you know? Mr. Saudi. And it went on and on and on and on and on. It was just like this fucking eternal day, you know.
They went back to their parents. They're like, "Oh, new teacher is very
new
thoughtful.
Teacher is it's very
emotional,
very sad."
That's a funny one. That's a good one.
But off the top of my head, yeah, there's probably something else. But yeah,
that's it. I put you on the spot with that. I think this character building.
It takes a while to build, doesn't it?
Still building.
Still building.
Nice one. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Cheers for your time.
Thanks very much for having me. Take care.
Excellent. If you're into this kind of thing, 101 Part-Time Jobs puts out 2 episodes a week on our podcast feed, which you can find on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else with podcasts. We've had episodes with Idols, Hack Baker, Self-Esteem, Yard Act, and loads more. So you can find all them on our audio feed. And if you subscribe here, you'll get upcoming videos as well.